The rotor blades slowed to a gentle whir as I landed Liberty in the backyard, her skids settling into the grass like a hawk returning to roost. She was my prize, a fully restored UH-1 Huey helicopter, the kind I flew in the service, now reborn as a crop-dusting rig and charter bird. She wasn't just metal and wires to me. She was memory, purpose, freedom. I shut down the engine and stepped out, sweat on my brow, dirt under my nails. It had been a long weekend, 2 charity flyovers, 1 remote pesticide drop for a vineyard, and a detour to surprise a veteran buddy on his birthday. The kind of work that left me tired but proud. As I rounded the house toward the garage, something caught my eye: tire ruts. Fresh ones, carving through the side gate. I froze. The gate itself was splintered at the hinge, bent inward like it had been forced open. My chest tightened. I sprinted back to the yard, boots thudding against the stone path. Liberty was gone. The lawn where she'd landed that morning was bare. Only a flattened outline in the grass remained, framed by gouged-out tracks. It was as if someone had lifted her off the earth and erased her from existence. For a split second, I thought theft. Then I spotted the crisp manila envelope taped to the fence. Notice of violation. Fairview Crest Homeowners Association. Subject: unauthorized aircraft. Action taken: removal and relocation. I scanned the paper, heart pounding in disbelief. According to the HOA, my helicopter had been towed. Yes, towed, for violating a newly passed regulation banning aviation-class vehicles from all residential properties. No prior notice. No hearing. Just gone. I stood there, jaw clenched, fists tightening around the paper. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a power play. Leonard Crane, HOA president, former insurance executive, self-appointed czar of Fairview Crest. He'd had it out for me ever since we moved in 2 years ago. From the moment he saw Liberty, he'd been itching to ground her. Claimed she was a hazard to the neighborhood aesthetic. Said the sound disrupted his meditation hours. Filed no fewer than 6 complaints in a single year. Every time, the board sided with me until now. Now, apparently, he'd found a loophole. Natalie, my wife, came outside, eyes wide. "Jake, what happened?" "They took her," I said, holding out the notice. "The HOA actually took Liberty." She read the document, her face hardening. "They can't just— this isn't legal, is it?" "Doesn't matter," I muttered. "They did it anyway." Later that evening, I called the sheriff. His tone was diplomatic, careful. "They hired a specialty contractor. You'd have to take it up with the HOA or through civil court." "Sorry, Jake." I hung up, seething. This wasn't just about a helicopter. It was about control. About one man trying to flex his authority under the guise of community order. I'd dealt with bullies before. Overseas, in boardrooms, even in the cockpit. But Leonard Crane wasn't just any bureaucratic weasel. He was dangerous because he thought petty rules made him untouchable. Well, I knew better. The next morning, I drove to the impound site listed on the notice, 40 miles away, behind a private lot surrounded by chain link and barbed wire. Liberty sat inside, surrounded by rusted tractors and confiscated RVs, her olive green shell covered in dust, like a caged eagle. I paid the fee, signed the release papers. The man at the desk, a weathered, one-eyed veteran named Bill, handed me the keys with a smirk. They said it was unauthorized aircraft. Hell, son, I thought it was art. "She's more than that," I said. "And this isn't over." As I powered Liberty back up and lifted her into the sky, I didn't feel victorious. I felt violated. But I also felt something else building in my chest, something cold, focused, deliberate. This wasn't going to be a letter-writing campaign. I wasn't going to grovel at HOA meetings or plead for mercy from the very people who broke my gate and took what was mine. Leonard Crane wanted to play games? Good. I had one in mind. And it involved a helicopter, a payload, and the most humiliating HOA meeting in the history of suburbia. I didn't speak a word on the flight back. Liberty hummed under my hands, steady and loyal, while my mind plotted what came next. Leonard Crane had made one mistake. He'd assumed I'd roll over like the rest of them. I wasn't most people. Back home, I parked Liberty at a friend's private airstrip just outside city limits. No HOA, no rules, no vultures in khakis with clipboards. When I returned to Fairview Crest, the stares began immediately. Neighbors glanced from behind blinds. Some whispered. One even offered a sheepish thumbs up. Word had spread. Natalie was waiting on the porch. Her expression said everything: concern, weariness, and that trace of fierce loyalty that made me fall in love with her in the first place. "You gonna tell me what's next?" she asked. "I'm gonna teach Leonard Crane what it feels like to be on the receiving end of power." Her brow furrowed. "Jake, don't make this a war. It already is." I wasn't interested in petty vandalism or shouting matches. I wanted something symbolic. Clean. Undeniable. I started gathering intel. The HOA's monthly meeting was set for Sunday at 3 p.m., hosted in their crown jewel, the Fairview Crest Community Clubhouse. Brick columns, manicured hedges, a koi pond, Leonard's personal temple of suburban supremacy. That's where he delivered his State of the Neighborhood speeches, sipping sparkling water while flexing his authority over shrub heights and mailbox designs. Perfect. I called Marcus Beckett, a former Army mechanic turned livestock farmer, and one of the few people who didn't think I was insane for owning a helicopter. "You need what?" he said, clearly stifling a laugh. "Fertilizer," I replied. "Wet. Mixed. The real stuff." "Animal?" "All of them. Cow, pig, chicken. A nice blend. I want it biblical." There was a pause. Then Marcus said, "Oh, I'm in." The next day, I drove out to his property with a blueprint sketched on the back of a diner napkin. He walked me through his barn, pointing out tanks, hoses, and pumps that could be rigged to release at altitude. With his help, I retrofitted an old crop-dusting canister and mounted it beneath Liberty's frame. We tested the pressure release system, calibrating the valves for precision. On the third test, the nozzle let loose a glorious torrent of sludge over a fallow field, splashing in a perfect cone. "Now that," Marcus declared, "is fertilizer with attitude." By Saturday night, everything was ready. The tank was loaded, the route mapped, the wind forecast checked. Still, Natalie couldn't shake her concern. "You know this could backfire, right? He could sue. Press charges. Call the FAA." "He took something from me," I said, my voice even. "I'm just giving him something back." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then make it count." The next morning, I put on my old flight suit, not for drama, but for what it represented. I wasn't just a resident anymore. I was a man reclaiming his ground. At 2:50 p.m., I climbed into Liberty, fired up her engine, and lifted off from the farm strip. She rose like a queen reclaimed, her rotors cutting the air with steady authority. At 3:04 p.m., I hovered a mile from the clubhouse, watching the scene below through binoculars. Folding chairs were lined up in the courtyard. Leonard stood at the podium, gesturing with his usual flair. People sipped lemonade, clueless. I clicked the radio, patched into my GoPro, and tightened my grip on the release switch. This was it. No retreat. No hesitation. I banked left, the clubhouse locking into view. The clubhouse came into view like a miniature fortress. Red brick walls, white-trimmed windows, and Leonard Crane front and center, gesturing like a courtroom drama star. A white canopy shaded the makeshift podium, and neatly dressed residents sat in rows of lawn chairs, sun hats tilted, smiles tight. They had no idea what was coming. I circled once at a higher altitude, giving Liberty time to adjust to the shifting wind. The hum of her rotors was distant, but unmistakable. Heads turned. Hands shielded eyes. Leonard paused mid-sentence. "Perfect." I descended to 500 feet and leveled off. The GoPro mounted to the dash blinked red. The custom valve lever was within arm's reach, wired to the tank slung beneath Liberty's belly, loaded and ready. I flipped on the external speaker. My voice boomed from above. "Good afternoon, Fairview Crest. This is Captain Stenson, bringing you a very special delivery from your friendly neighborhood airman." Gasps erupted. A few residents stood, some pointed skyward. Phones appeared, faces tilted up. Leonard stared straight at the helicopter, squinting into the sun, hands on his hips. Even from the air, I could read his expression, disbelief melting into dread. I smiled and pulled the lever. The hatch opened with a clean metallic clink. Then came the drop. A slow, majestic cascade of semi-liquid manure arced through the sky like justice in physical form. It struck the clubhouse roof with a splat, then sprayed across the front steps, the podium, and the koi pond in a series of glorious, squelching impacts. Chairs overturned as residents screamed and scattered, shielding themselves with HOA pamphlets and picnic trays. Leonard tried to run, but he was too late. A final splatter caught him square in the back, shoulders to loafers. I hovered for 3 long seconds. Long enough for the crowd to look up again. Long enough for Leonard to raise both arms and shout something I couldn't hear, but it didn't matter. The moment had been sealed. Filmed. Etched in suburban legend. I toggled the mic once more. This concludes your fertilizer demonstration. Next time, try knocking before stealing a man's helicopter. I pulled up on the collective, Liberty lifting effortlessly above the chaos. I tipped her nose and banked left, offering the crowd one final salute with the tail rotor before disappearing behind the trees. As I gained altitude, I could see residents scattering across the golf course, trails of mud behind them. Others simply stood frozen, phones in hand, jaws slack. 10 minutes later, I landed at the farm strip where Marcus waited, arms crossed, grinning like a kid at a demolition derby. Was it glorious? He asked as I climbed out. Legendary. He handed me a beer. You're already trending online. I took a swig and leaned against the skids, watching the sun dip low behind the hills. For the first time in days, the tight knot in my chest began to loosen. But I knew the storm wasn't over. Not yet. By Monday morning, the video had gone viral. Drone footage, shaky phone recordings, and slow-motion replays of Leonard Crane getting christened by the contents of a $1,000 Manure cocktail were stitched together with dramatic music and flaming text overlays. TikTok called me the Helicopter Avenger. Reddit dubbed it the HOA airstrike. Even the local news picked it up. Veteran drops justice from above on rogue HOA. Leonard didn't make a public statement, he couldn't. Rumor was, he'd slipped trying to hose off and fractured his ego somewhere between the koi pond and the rose garden. What was left of the HOA board scrambled to do damage control, but by Tuesday, 3 members had resigned, citing leadership concerns and a hostile community climate. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. On Wednesday, I received an official letter from Fairview Crest. Unlike the garbage they'd posted to my fence, this one was hand-delivered and sealed with the HOA's gold-embossed crest. Fancy. Almost apologetic. Mr. Stenson. In light of recent events and upon further legal review, the board acknowledges that the removal of your personal aircraft was conducted without proper procedure or prior notice. We sincerely regret the distress this has caused. The HOA is currently amending its charter to clarify aircraft provisions and will not oppose the future presence of your helicopter on your property. Sincerely, Acting Chair Elaine Timmons. I read it twice. No apology from Leonard. No real accountability. But it was still a surrender, quiet, calculated, and absolute. Natalie framed the letter and hung it above the fireplace like a hunting trophy. Think they'll ever mess with you again? She asked. I shook my head. Not unless they want a star in the sequel. Life settled into something like peace after that. Liberty returned to her spot in the backyard, this time behind reinforced gates and motion-detecting cameras. Neighbors who used to cross the street when I walked by now stopped to chat. Some offered baked goods. One woman brought a pie with a post-it that read, "For the pilot who gave Crane a lesson in humility." Turns out, I wasn't the only one sick of Leonard's reign. But not everyone was thrilled. A few board loyalists circulated a petition calling for my expulsion from the neighborhood, citing reckless behavior and aerial aggression. It got 6 signatures, 3 of them from the same household. Still, I kept my head down. I wasn't interested in becoming the next tyrant. Then one evening near sunset, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Leonard Crane himself standing on my porch. He looked smaller somehow. No blazer, no clipboard, just khakis, a windbreaker, and the faint smell of disinfectant. "Mr. Stenson," he said, voice flat. "May I?" I didn't move. "You're on my property, Leonard." That's already one step further than I took. He gave a weak smile. "Fair enough." A long silence passed. Then he sighed. "You made your point." "Did I?" Leonard glanced toward the backyard, where Liberty rested like a monument in the golden light. "You embarrass me in front of the entire neighborhood. Online. My wife left town to stay with her sister." He paused. "But you were right. I overreached." He shifted uncomfortably, fingers fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. "I thought rules were everything. That keeping order meant keeping control. But somewhere along the line, I stopped listening to people. Forgot that this is a neighborhood, not a kingdom." I didn't soften. Not completely. But I nodded. "I just wanted to be left alone," I said. "Until you made that impossible." He looked down. "Won't happen again." Leonard turned to leave, but before he stepped off the porch, he stopped. "Jake," he said quietly, "that was a hell of a shot." And then he walked away. I watched him go, the tension between us drifting off like rotor wash. Later that night, Natalie sat next to me on the porch swing, her head on my shoulder. "Think we'll ever live that down?" she asked. "Nope," I said, smiling. "But I think we'll live it up just fine." Above us, the sky stretched wide and open, painted with streaks of lavender and orange. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled. And in the backyard, beneath a tarp and a clean coat of polish, Liberty waited. Because peace was nice. But just in case, I kept the tank.